I used to think loyalty was a kind of currency, not the cheesy "we're family" stuff on posters in the break room, but the real thing: showing up early, staying late, taking the ugly projects nobody wanted, and being the person who never made the boss wonder if the job would get done. I believed that kind of consistency stacked up somewhere, that someone was keeping score. My first real job out of school was at a mid-sized company with a clean lobby and a tired back hallway that always smelled like burnt coffee. The first week, my manager handed me a key card and said, half joking, "If you survive Q4, you'll be fine." I laughed like it was a rite of passage. It felt grown up. It felt like I had finally found the staircase you climb to a stable life. I learned the rhythms fast. Mondays were for recovering from weekend emails. Tuesdays for meetings that could have been 2 sentences. Wednesdays for quick requests that ate entire afternoons. And Friday afternoons, if you were lucky, were for pretending you weren't still working when everyone else slipped out early. I told myself I liked it. The pressure, the importance, the way people started to rely on me. When I fixed a crisis at 6:30 p.m. and got a great save in my inbox, it felt like recognition. When I covered for a coworker who was out and the department didn't fall apart, it felt like proof. My dad had worked the same place for 30 years. He taught me that stability came from being needed. Be the guy they can't replace, he'd say. I took that line and built a whole identity around it. I wore my reliability like a badge, and I didn't notice how quickly a badge can start to feel like a collar. The first time I missed a friend's birthday because of an urgent report, I didn't even apologize properly. I said, "You know how it is," like I'd earned the right to sacrifice normal life. The second time I canceled dinner with my girlfriend because a director wanted numbers tonight, I bought flowers and acted like that balanced the scale. At the office, people called me dependable. They meant it as a compliment. I heard it as a promise. Dependable people get rewarded. They get promoted. They get protected. They get remembered. I thought I was building something that would eventually pay me back. Back then, I loved the small signals. My calendar filling up meant I mattered. A Slack ping from leadership meant I was trusted. Even the stress had a strange sweetness because it separated me from people who clocked out and forgot the place existed. I told myself they were missing out, that they didn't understand what it meant to be serious. In hindsight, that was the first lie. Seriousness isn't the same as surrender. I truly didn't realize I was also building the trap I'd spent years trying to climb out of. There was a moment early on when I decided quietly to become the loyal one. It wasn't a speech, it was a Tuesday. A senior analyst quit with 2 weeks' notice, right before a big client renewal. The work didn't disappear, it just slid onto whoever was closest. My manager called me into his office, closed the door, and said, "I need you on this, just for a little while." He looked tired, almost grateful. I felt flattered that he trusted me. "Of course," I said. I didn't ask what would come off my plate. I didn't ask how a little while would be measured. I just nodded like a good soldier. For the next month, I lived inside spreadsheets. I ate lunch at my desk. I learned the clients' quirks, their favorite metrics, the phrases that kept them calm when things went wrong. I became the person who could answer their questions without looking it up. When renewal week hit, I was sending decks at midnight and revising forecasts at dawn. The renewal closed, the clients stayed. the director popped into our area and clapped my shoulder like I was a high school quarterback. "That was huge," he said. My manager forwarded me an email thread with a simple line, "Nice work." That night, I drove home with the deck still open on my passenger seat, like it deserved its own seatbelt. I stopped at a gas station for dinner because it was the only place open, and I ate in the car with the dome light on, reading comments on slides while strangers walked past my window. I told myself this was what professionals did. I waited for the follow-up, the part where someone said, "Let's talk about your next step." I imagined a raise, or at least a real title change, something that matched the way the work had expanded and the way my life had shrunk. Instead, the next week, my manager called me in again. Same office, same door closing. "We're going to keep you on that account," he said. "You've got the relationship." He said it like he was giving me something valuable, and maybe he was, but it wasn't what I thought I'd earned. It was more work, more dependence, more people knowing they could lean on me. I started saying yes by default. I became the person who filled the gaps. When someone missed a deadline, I stepped in. When someone didn't understand a process, I explained it. When a project was behind, I stayed late, not because I was asked every time, but because I couldn't tolerate being the reason something failed. My co-workers started to treat me like a safety net. They'd say, "Can you just take a look?" And I would. They'd say, "You're good at this," and I'd carry it home like a trophy. At night, I'd stare at my phone waiting for the next email, like a dog listening for a whistle. I told myself this was temporary, the price of being noticed. I didn't see that being noticed and being used can look exactly the same from the inside. The first promotion I didn't get happened on a Wednesday morning in a conference room with stale air and a projector that always had a blue tint. We were all there for the quarterly meeting. The director did the usual performance theater, charts, applause for the best numbers, a few jokes about coffee. Then he said, "We have some exciting announcements," and he started naming promotions. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but I was expecting my name. I had done the math in my head for months, the accounts I'd stabilized, the late nights, the way newer people asked me what to do before they asked their own leads. I wasn't chasing ego, I was chasing alignment, my responsibilities finally matching my label. When he said Amanda's name, people clapped. When he said Jordan's name, people clapped. When he said my name, he didn't. He moved on like my name wasn't on the list. I felt my face hold steady while something inside me dropped. I kept clapping for everyone else because that's what you do. But my hands felt disconnected, like they belonged to somebody watching a different meeting. Afterward, I told myself there had to be a reason. Timing. Budget. Maybe they needed me where I was. Maybe I was too valuable to move right now. That sounded like praise, so I clung to it. I booked a one-on-one with my manager. He smiled in that practiced way managers do when they know a conversation is going to hurt someone. "You're doing great," he said. "Your work is strong. It's just, we need you in your current role for a bit longer. You're the glue." The glue? The word landed like a compliment and then started burning. Glue holds things together, sure, but glue doesn't get the spotlight. Glue gets used up, spread thin, and tossed away when the job is done. I asked what I needed to do to be considered next time. He gave me a list that sounded reasonable. Lead a cross-functional project, improve visibility, mentor someone. Then he added, "But honestly, keep doing what you're doing. It matters." So I did. I took on a cross-functional project. I mentored a new hire. I said yes to presentations I hated. I started arriving earlier and leaving later because I was scared that if I eased up, someone would finally see I wasn't special, just willing. A month later, Jordan asked me to help with a project he'd just been promoted into. "You're the only one who knows how the data really works," he said. I helped because that's what I do. He thanked me sincerely and then went into meetings I wasn't invited to. I started noticing the pattern. The people who advanced weren't the ones who saved the day at 9 p.m. They were the ones who were in the room at 9 a.m. They were the ones who were comfortable letting something be imperfect if it preserved their time. They were the ones who could say no without feeling guilty. Meanwhile, I was stacking loyalty like bricks, building a wall I thought would turn into a doorway. I didn't realize I was just making it harder to leave. The longer I stayed, the more my loyalty turned into a story I told myself to justify the staying. I was 30-something by then, not old, but old enough that my life had shape. Rent, a car payment, the beginning of a retirement account, the kind of grown-up structure that makes you careful. The company wasn't perfect, but it was stable. It had benefits. It had decent insurance matching on the 401k and a sense that if I just kept my head down, nothing terrible could happen. It had predictable hours on paper, and I had become known there. People knew my name. People messaged me when things went wrong. In a weird way, that felt safer than being anonymous somewhere new. I bought into the idea that stability was its own reward. I told myself that a sure paycheck mattered more than ambition, that I was being responsible, that leaving would be reckless. But the truth is, I was scared. I remember standing in the kitchen one night, laptop open on the counter, answering emails while the microwave beeped behind me. My girlfriend, now my wife, walked in and said, "Are you ever off?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was tired. That was worse. "I'm just finishing," I said, like I always did. She looked at the screen, then at me. "You've been just finishing for 5 years." I wanted to snap back with something about providing, about commitment. Instead, I just stared at the email chain like it was a court case. The truth I didn't want to say out loud was this: the company didn't need my commitment. It needed my compliance. The next week, a recruiter reached out on LinkedIn. The role was similar, but the pay was higher and the title was better. I read the message 3 times, heart racing like I'd been caught stealing. I didn't reply. I archived it. I told myself I wasn't ready. At work, the requests kept coming. A new system rollout, a client escalation, a quick favor from a VP. My manager would say I wouldn't ask anyone else, and I'd feel proud and trapped at the same time. I started measuring my worth by how many fires I could put out. I didn't notice how that made the company comfortable with starting fires. If I could always save it, why would they fix the process? If I could always cover the gap, why would they hire? If I could always absorb the stress, why would they protect me from it? Loyalty, I learned, is incredibly convenient for the people receiving it. One night after a particularly ugly week, I opened my annual review document and read the areas for growth. It said I needed to improve delegation and focus on strategic thinking. I almost laughed. I wasn't delegating because there was nobody to delegate to, and strategic thinking requires time to think, which I didn't have because I was busy being their glue. That's when the first crack appeared in the story. Maybe the reward wasn't coming because the system wasn't built to reward loyalty. It was built to harvest it. The moment I stopped believing fully happened in a hallway. Our department had a mini crisis. A major client was threatening to leave. The blame bounced around like a pinball, but the solution landed where it always did, on the people who could actually do the work, on me. For 2 weeks, I lived in escalation calls. I built dashboards. I wrote summaries. I rewrote summaries so they sounded executive. I coached other teams on what to say. I did the unglamorous part, translating chaos into something leadership could pretend was controlled. One afternoon, I walked out of a conference room after a brutal call and saw the director and my manager talking near the elevators. They were smiling, not stressed, not relieved, just normal. The director said something I couldn't hear, and my manager laughed. As I passed, I heard the director's last sentence clearly. "We'll need him to keep owning it. He's steady." He said it like he was describing a chair, a thing you sit on, useful because it doesn't move. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, but my chest felt hot, like embarrassment and anger had decided to share the same space. Steady. That was the label. Not brilliant, not high potential, not future leader. Steady. That night I went home and told my wife what I'd heard. I tried to make it sound small, like office nonsense, but she didn't let me. "You know what that means," she said. "It just means they trust me," I argued, even as my voice sounded thinner than I wanted. She shook her head. "No, it means they've decided what you're for." That sentence hit harder than the director's did, because she was right, and I knew it. And I'd been pretending not to for years. Loyalty had become my brand, and brands are hard to change once the market agrees. The next day, I opened that recruiter message I'd archived. I reread it. I stared at the compensation range. I stared at the title. Then I did something that felt like betrayal. I replied. The first interview was on a lunch break in my car, sweating because I didn't want anyone to see me on a call. The second was a week later, after work, sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop angled so my current company logo wouldn't reflect in the screen. Every step made me feel guilty, like I was cheating on a partner. And that guilt was the clearest sign that something had gone wrong. A job should not own your conscience, but the guilt also had a grip. What if leaving proved I wasn't as valuable as I thought? What if the new place didn't like me? What if I failed without the comfort of being the steady one? Then my current company sent out an email about doing more with less. It was full of cheerful language and empty promises. I read it and realized the truth I had avoided. The company wasn't evil. It was indifferent. It would take whatever I gave, because taking was what it did. That's when loyalty stopped feeling noble and started feeling naive. When the offer came, I didn't celebrate. I stared at it like it was a trap. The money was better. The title was better. The role sounded like the work I'd already been doing, but with actual authority attached. It was a step up. But my stomach stayed tight because now I had to do the part I'd been avoiding. I had to leave. I rehearsed the resignation conversation in my head for days. I imagined my manager being happy for me. I imagined him being furious. I imagined him making a counteroffer. I imagined him reminding me of all the times we took care of you. I imagined myself folding and staying. On a Thursday morning, I walked into his office with a printed letter because I didn't trust my voice to stay steady without something in my hands. He looked up, surprised, and said, "What's up?" "I got another offer," I said. "I'm going to take it." His expression didn't change much. That was the first shock. No anger, no sadness, just calculation, like a chess player seeing a piece move. "How much are they offering?" he asked. I told him. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Give me a day." The next day he came back with a counteroffer. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't the full match. It came with the same promise. "We can get you where you want to be." The same sentence I'd been fed in different shapes for years. I asked about the title change I'd been waiting on. He said it would take time. I asked why it had taken so long already. He shrugged like the question was weather. Then he said, "The line I'll never forget. I just didn't think you'd leave. Not, we don't want to lose you. Not, we should have valued you more. Just, I didn't think you'd leave." It hit me like proof. My loyalty hadn't been respected. It had been assumed. They weren't rewarding me for staying. They were budgeting around the fact that I would. I told him I appreciated the counteroffer, but I was still leaving. The next week was surreal. People stopped by my desk with the same script. "Wow, didn't expect this." "Good for you. Where are you going?" A few were genuinely happy. A few looked panicked, like my departure would expose how much I'd been carrying. Leadership sent a brief email thanking me for my contributions. On my last day, I turned in my key card and walked out past the clean lobby and the tired back hallway. The air outside felt sharper, like I'd been indoors too long. I sat in my car and waited for the sadness, for the nostalgia, for the moment where I'd miss it. Instead, I felt relief, and underneath the relief, something quieter, anger at myself for giving away so much time because I believed loyalty had to be earned and repaid like a contract. The truth was simpler. Loyalty at work is optional on both sides, and the company had been practicing that truth the whole time. I started the new job 2 weeks later, and the first time I logged off at a normal hour without checking my phone, it felt unfamiliar, like walking without a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. The lesson didn't fully land until months after I left, when the old company called. It was my former co-worker, the new owner of the account I'd managed. He sounded exhausted. "Hey," he said, "I'm trying to figure out how you handled the reporting for the renewal. Do you have the template?" I did. Of course I did. I still had it in a folder, like a habit. For a second I considered sending it immediately, slipping back into the familiar role of rescuer. Then I felt that old collar tighten. "I can point you to where it should be," I said, "but I'm not really in a position to maintain it." There was a pause. "Right," he said, and I could hear disappointment, not in me personally, but in the universe, like the safety net had moved. After the call, I sat there and realized something. The company was still functioning without me. Messier, maybe. More stressful for whoever inherited the weight. But it was functioning. The building hadn't burned down. The stock hadn't collapsed. The clients hadn't evaporated. My loyalty hadn't been keeping the place alive. It had been keeping it comfortable. At the new job, I watched how people moved. They were competent, but they didn't martyr themselves. They protected their calendars. They asked for resources. They said that's not possible by Friday, without apologizing like they'd committed a crime. They weren't less committed. They were just less owned. I started noticing how many of my old behaviors were learned: fear, answering emails immediately, taking on extra work to avoid being judged, volunteering for everything so nobody could say I wasn't trying. Those were survival strategies in a system that rewarded compliance. One afternoon, my new manager asked me to take on an additional project. My old reflex was to say yes instantly. Instead, I asked, what should I deprioritize to make room? The sentence felt risky. My voice stayed calm, but my pulse spiked. He blinked, then nodded. Good question, he said. Let's decide. Nothing bad happened. The sky didn't fall. He didn't think I was disloyal. He thought I was managing. That's when I understood what I'd confused for years. Loyalty isn't a virtue if it's just fear wearing a suit. Real loyalty is chosen, mutual, and specific. It's what you give to people who also protect you. It's not something you pour into an organization that treats you like a steady chair. I didn't become cynical. I didn't decide work is meaningless. I just stopped expecting it to love me back. Every now and then, someone from the old company would message, asking how things were. A few admitted they were thinking of leaving too. I'd tell them the truth. It was scary, and then it was fine, and then it was better. The biggest shift wasn't the pay or the title. It was realizing my life had been built around a promise I invented. If I stayed loyal long enough, someone would reward me. Leaving didn't make me braver. It made me more honest. And that honesty was the first real reward I'd gotten in years. I still believe in doing good work. That part never changed. What changed is who I do it for and what I'm willing to trade for it. Sometimes I think about the younger version of me, proud of being the dependable one, and I don't want to mock him. He was trying to build a stable life. He wanted to be respected. He wanted to feel safe. Those aren't stupid desires, they're human. But I wish I could sit across from him in that tired back hallway and tell him the truth he wouldn't hear from anyone at the office. Loyalty is not a career plan. If you want to be loyal to something, be loyal to your standards. Be loyal to your health. Be loyal to the people who see you when you're not performing. Be loyal to the life you're trying to build outside of the building with the clean lobby. At work, I learned to use loyalty like a tool, not a personality. I'll stay late when it matters. I'll carry weight when someone's in trouble. I'll do the unglamorous part because it's the right thing. But I don't confuse that with a promise of reward. Because here's the part I didn't understand for too long. Companies reward leverage, not loyalty. They reward what's visible, what's scarce, what changes outcomes. Loyalty, especially the quiet kind, gets filed under expected. The old me thought leaving meant abandoning people. The new me understands the difference between abandoning and choosing. Choosing your next step isn't betrayal, it's adulthood. I think about my manager's line, "I just didn't think you'd leave." And I hear the entire lesson inside it. They build systems around the people who never leave. They plan their budgets and their deadlines and their staffing around your willingness to stretch. If you want the stretch to end, you have to end it. No one hands you permission. The funny thing is, the most loyal thing I ever did for myself was walking out that last day and not looking back. Not because I hated them, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood the math. Time is the only thing you don't get back. Money comes and goes. Titles change. Companies rebrand and merge and forget. But those nights at the kitchen counter, answering emails while the microwave beeped, those don't return. There's a quiet power in being willing to walk, not dramatically, not with speeches, just with clarity. The moment you stop being afraid of leaving, your work becomes cleaner. You negotiate better. You ask for what you need. And you stop treating exhaustion like a medal. Now, when I come home, I try to be present. I try to let work stay at work. I'm not perfect. Old habits still whisper. But I can hear them now. And that's the difference. I thought loyalty would be rewarded. It was rewarded in a way I didn't expect. It taught me what my life costs. And once you know the price, you stop paying it blindly.